Coming up on this holiday edition of Main Street, we share in a Kentucky Christmas. We'll revisit a dark chapter in American history as we recount a wartime Christmas through the diaries and memoirs of Civil War soldiers. And we go in search of the origins of the Christmas tree. Coming up on Main Street.
Our family Christmas tree. We got to be unanimous. What do you think? It's going to be in a bucket, which is going to make it a whole lot taller. And then it's going to drop down, and it's going to be all nice and full. I like it. Our family Christmas tree.
Family Christmas tree. I've got the front of it. Who got the back of it?
Make it, Hank?
Yeah, I can make it.
People want that perfect shape. Everybody's looking for the perfect Christmas tree.
It has come to symbolize the advent of the Christmas season, heralding the birth of Christ child.
I want to help y'all. Get it up here.
The magnificence of new life through vegetation evergreen. And while there are variations on a Christmas tree theme, there's no mistaking its traditional pyramid shape, the tingling scent of its boughs, the resplendent ornamentation, the unmistakable icon of the Yuletide.
We have a big knife about this long, kind of looks like a machete, and it's real sharp, and the guys come in here with those knives and kind of give it this kind of action, you know, and give it that Christmas tree look. And then again, they work on the double leaders. For instance, that's what we call a double leader. We'll cut that one out so we don't have two leaders coming up out of that plant. That's not desirable. We want one like that, so it'll give it that good perfect shape.
Nurseryman Casey Shott knows what it takes to grow the perfect Christmas tree, but tracing the tree's origin proves to be more elusive.
There's no consensus about where the Christmas tree comes from. When we say the Christmas tree, there are lots of different ways of having a Christmas tree, and it's very hard to date historically. But the stories about Christmas trees start very early.
Much of the tree's mystique comes from ancient lore that gives magical powers to plants and trees that stay green through the winter. In many cases, the worship of plant life had its origin in pagan rituals.
In 1510, in Riga, which is a Latvian city on the Baltic, we know that people were, in fact, selling Christmas trees. So it was an established custom, obviously, by that time. And we know from that reference that people were dancing around them and then burning them.
The leafy lore is lengthy, but most historians find common ground in the German connection. Probably one of the most famous German Christmas legends centers around Martin Luther.
It is said that he brought a tree into his house for his wife and children. He decorated it and put candles on it, pointing the way to heaven and their new religion, or their Protestant religion of Christ, the Christ child.
This, however, is legend. Next to Germany, Britain most readily accepted the Christmas holiday and its traditions. One of the first recorded trees is at the court of Henry VIII in Great Britain.
We have our English tree draped with ivy. Ivy harks back once again to the pagan custom and the Druids. Ivy is supposedly good luck to man. Hence, they bring ivy in the house during Christmas. We also have on our tree holly, and the legend of holly is a sweet legend about the baby Jesus being hidden in a holly tree when Mary and Joseph and the babe were fleeing from King Herod, supposedly to save the baby Jesus, the holly sprouted thick, stiff leaves and thorns. And holly, it is said, is good luck to women, so they bring holly in at Christmas time.
Britain's Queen Victoria's choice of a husband may well have helped to ensure the fate of the Christmas tree. Prince Albert, a German, was said to have sent fully decorated trees to schools and military barracks at Christmas. Middle and upper-class Brits were quick to follow the lead of the royal family. But purists continue to equate the tree with ancient pagan worship.
I am the spirit of Christmas past.
Even the English novelist Charles Dickens, so closely associated with Christmas, found the practice frivolous. And as you'll note, there is no reference to a Christmas tree in Dickens' famous work, A Christmas Carol.
You can't do this. You can't be so unjust. Give us a little more time. A week. Please.
It is during the Revolutionary War that the Christmas tree shows up in the United States. Again, we thank the Germans.
The Hessians who fought during the Revolutionary War with us were so homesick for their Christmas celebration and for a tree that it is recorded that it was undoubtedly the Hessians who introduced the Americans from the very beginning to the Christmas tree.
Estimates indicate that in the 1900s, only 1 in 5 U.S. families had a Christmas tree. By 1930, almost every family has a tree. Ornamentation of the Christmas tree goes back as early as the first trees, when ancient Romans used gilded fruit and candles to worship. But the Germans and good old Yankee ingenuity are credited for universal acceptance of the glass ornament.
It is in Germany that in the 1840s, the glass ornaments and baubles for the tree were made. They were made in homes, so it started as a cottage industry, and they were imported to the United States by F.W. Woolworth, and of course were an immediate success.
In Germany, candles appeared as the most important ornament on the tree. Families would wait until Christmas Eve to put up their trees to cut the risk of fire from candles. The first electric lights were put on a Christmas tree in 1882 by Edward Johnson, a colleague of Thomas Edison's.
So now, typically you have electric lights in this country, which stand in for the candles that used to be. You have the colored balls, which stand in for the fruit. And then if you look at the nature of Christmas tree ornaments, you can see that many of them are miniature light versions of toys.
Very little has actually changed except in the meaning and the worship that we do. Instead of worshiping the tree, we worship the Christ child, which after all is essentially Christmas. It's basically a religious holiday, although it's been in many ways changed to be more commercial, but it will never be totally oblivious to the fact that it's based on the Christ child.
This little tree right here looks like? Remember Charlie Brown's Christmas when he goes and he gets that little bitty tree because he feels sorry for that little tree and he takes it home? That's Charlie Brown's Christmas tree right there.
I never even seen it.
You never saw that? Yes, you have. You just forgot.
No, I haven't.
We're here in what once were Civil War trenches, occupied by both Union and Confederate troops during the war. It's located on the campus of Western Kentucky University. The celebration of Christmas during the Civil War was meager, if not sedate. It was a time of tremendous political upheaval, a time when people were proclaiming peace on earth, goodwill to men, and yet we were seeing some of the worst destruction and brutality ever known to America. This was a time when the celebration of Christmas was built on the foundation of family unity and closeness. But as hundreds of thousands of fathers, brothers, sons, and husbands were marched off to war, this foundation was weakened, if not entirely dismantled. It was a time when farm boys from Kentucky and Tennessee, who'd never been more than a stone's throw away from home, suddenly found themselves hundreds of miles from home, sitting around sputtering campfires. You know, it's been more than 130 years since the start of the Civil War, but these Christmases past live on through the memoirs and diaries of Civil War soldiers, like this letter from a Kentuckian who was camped out with a group of Ohio volunteers near Adair County in 1862.
Christmas is about over. How have you enjoyed it? We've had a very pleasant day, but it did not appear like Christmas to me. How could it? It almost made me feel homesick. Contrast the circumstances of 1 year ago when I was far from here, surrounded by friends in a hospitable abode, supplied with all the luxuries and comforts that the country could produce. Here, we are surrounded by God that will let no one pass. But field and staff officers can, and without pass from the commander of the brigade. It is difficult to procure the little luxuries that might be found in this country.
Although being separated from family and friends weighed heavy on the hearts of both Confederate and Union soldiers, many of them tried in earnest to muster what little Christmas spirit they had into makeshift celebrations. Such was the case for Johnny Green, a South Central Kentucky native who was camped near Oakland for Christmas in 1861.
We had tents at this time, but the weather was very cold with snow on the ground. We had not learned to build chimneys to our tents, and we spent a very cold Christmas here. We were, however, fortunate enough to buy a turkey. Dave Caruth cooked the turkey, and I made and cooked the biscuits. We thought we had a sumptuous dinner for soldiers. Johnny Green, 4th Brigade, Confederate Army.
A regimental surgeon sent his sister a detailed account of his Christmas in a Confederate camp at Columbus, Kentucky.
Dear sister, I had nearly forgotten that yesterday was Christmas. I dined with some of the privates and enjoyed one of the most delicious turkeys I've ever eaten. It was stuffed and cooked by ourselves. The delicious oranges you kindly sent me made me think of Christmas days long gone by. I wish you had sent me a paper of candy, too. I've heard of no casualties arriving from Christmas drinking, though the Army was drunk Christmas Eve and had a headache Christmas morning. A few harmless fisticuffs and a vast amount of yelling were the only evidences that the boys were taking Christmas. I stayed at home in my mud and stick hut all day and received a number of visitors, though I gave them no eggnog. Your brother, Lunsford Yandell, Regimental Surgeon.
Throughout both Confederate and Union camps, the use of alcohol was common. Soldiers drank to ease the stress and boredom. They also drank to celebrate the holiday and to relieve the dull ache of being alone and homesick. John Cooper of Tennessee wrote of a typical Civil War celebration from a Confederate camp near Somerset, Kentucky.
Christmas came while we were in this camp and was celebrated by all hands and the cook, getting drunk. The usual scenes followed as a matter of course. Fighting and cursing was about all that was done from dawn till midnight. Private James Cooper, Confederate Army.
Similar celebrations took place in Union camps, though not to everyone's amusement. A Yankee youth camped with an Illinois regiment near Chattanooga was disgusted with the libations of his comrades and stated so in a single sentence under the December 25th entry in his diary.
All of Company B was on a drunk. Stub Davis was swearing like a trooper.
Holiday merriment was not limited to enlisted men. Officers also took part in make-do celebrations. This was the case on Christmas of 1861, when a large Union brigade camped on the banks of the Green River near Munfordville. It was from here that this entry was written in a diary.
The Major, the Adjutant, and I had a right royal Christmas dinner. A fine fat chicken, fried mush, coffee, peaches, and milk were on the table. The Major is engaged now in heating the second teapot of water for the punch. He certainly handles the teapot with consummate skill and attacks the punch with exceeding vigor. Colonel John Beatty, 3rd Ohio Volunteer Infantry.
As could be expected, the mixture of great quantities of alcohol and troops sometimes got out of hand. Many times, troops would hoop, holler, and fire their rifles into the air in an alcohol-tainted Christmas celebration. One such incident was related through the diary of a young rebel from Tennessee.
There's plenty of whiskey in camp. The boys were cutting up at such a terrible rate and shooting so much all through the brigade that the commanders of the regiment were ordered to send the next man who shot a gun to his headquarters, if he could be found. If he could not be found, the whole regiment must be ordered into line and stand for 1 hour. There wasn't much shooting after that.
As the war dragged on, spirits and morale began to falter. Celebrations were forgotten as military offensives like the famous Morgan's Christmas Raid were executed. As the war escalated, soldiers simply celebrated being alive, regardless of the holiday. A colonel with an Ohio group in Tennessee wrote of exchanging gunfire with the enemy on Christmas Day.
About noon, there were several discharges of artillery in our front, and last night, occasional shots served as cheerful reminders that the enemy was near. For 20 months now, I've been a sojourner in camps, a dweller in tents, going hither and yon at all hours of the day and night, in all sorts of weather, sleeping for weeks at a stretch without shelter. And yet, I have been strong and healthy. I'm very thankful I should feel this Christmas night. There goes the boom of another cannon at the front.
Another officer with the 59th Illinois in Middle Tennessee wrote of how his Christmas had consisted of pursuing rebel troops along Pulaski Road.
One generally commences this day with, "I wish you a Merry Christmas." But not in Tennessee, if he's in the Army and chasing hoods, poor devils, in the rain, as we are doing. Christmas is for Christendom, but although this is Sunday, no one would suspect that we are in Christendom. Well, Johnny Reb, we did our best to make Christmas lively for you.
Those involved in military offensives during Christmas would have hardly considered themselves lucky, but at least they had the war to occupy their thoughts. Many soldiers in both armies spent painfully boring hours encircled in camps, waiting for orders to direct their activities. One such fellow was a young rebel from Barron County who requested a Christmas pass to visit his ill mother. General Bragg refused the request, and the young soldier deserted camp. Upon his capture, General Bragg announced that discipline must be maintained. The young soldier faced a firing squad on December 26th. Here in Bowling Green, the Christmas of 1861 found an encampment of Confederate soldiers. While huddled around a campfire for warmth one Christmas Eve, probably not far from where we're standing today, one of those soldiers wrote this letter home.
Dear Ma, I telegraphed Pa yesterday that we had not moved and that I did not know when we would do so. Our orders have been officially countermanded, and Captain Porter thinks we will not move for several weeks, if this winter. We will probably go into winter quarters here. We are all ready to go Sunday morning, the horses harnessed even, and we sent to know if we should strike tents when orders came for us to wait until the rain was over. The next day, the order was countermanded. It is thought here that it was all a sham to keep the Army from wanting to go home for Christmas. Please write often. I expected to send this tonight, but cannot send it until tomorrow. Your loving son, Elbert Bolt Fall, Confederate Army.
5 Christmases came and went before the Civil War ran its bloody course. 5 Christmases passed as thoughts in letters and diaries became the only link to family and friends for soldiers camped beneath the colors of 2 different flags. After 5 long years and over 1 million casualties, a reunited nation slowly began to heal from the wounds of war. And the Christmas blessing of peace on earth, goodwill to man, rang from church steeples in the North and South with a new, crisp, clear meaning.
Kentucky writer Joe Creason once told a story about a school in Kentucky that was putting on a Christmas play. Seems the teacher had difficulty getting a student to play the part of the innkeeper, you know, the one that turned Mary and Joseph away. Well, it finally came down to the point where the teacher had to assign a student to the role. Even so, the little boy just wasn't comfortable with the part. So, the night of the big play, the little boy decided that he was going to ad-lib. When Mary and Joseph knocked at the door of the inn, the innkeeper asked, "May I help you?" Mary and Joseph asked if there was any room, and the innkeeper responded, "No, there's no room at the inn. I'm really sorry, but would you like to come in and have a drink?" And so we come to the place where the Christmas spirit dwells during the holiday season and throughout the year, home in Kentucky.
Christmas in Kentucky, like any place, is unique. Many of the Yule traditions in the Bluegrass State came by way of the Virginia colonies. They were adapted from European customs and made their way through the rugged Appalachians. In the early days, Christmas was not much of a holiday for Kentucky pioneers. There were no Christmas trees. Santa Claus could not be seen flying through winter skies in his sleigh. There was no kissing under the mistletoe. Instead, early Kentuckians were more concerned about keeping food on the table and protecting themselves from hostile Indians. It was considered to be more of a secular rather than religious holiday.
Diaries and letters from the pioneer days rarely mention Christmas. However, one of the more interesting diary entries comes from pioneer Daniel Trabue. While out hunting, Trabue and a friend shot a bear and had perhaps one of the earliest Yule feasts on the Kentucky frontier.
We skinned our bear, and it was a very good one. We roasted part of it for our Christmas dinner, and we feasted on it most bountifully. I thought it was as good a Christmas dinner as I had ever eaten.
During the 1800s, the celebration of Christmas in Kentucky slowly began to take hold. As the rugged frontier became more tamed, farmers and settlers began to adopt the European customs popular in the Virginia colonies. Holly and greenery were cut to decorate their houses and cabins. Mistletoes were prominently displayed.
In the latter half of the century, Kentuckians began to gather together to share the Christmas holiday. These gatherings were described by a Central City woman who said, when the guests arrived by carriage, sleigh, or horseback, the women would help their hostess with dinner preparations, while the men would drift out to the barn to inspect the host's tobacco crop, which was hanging from the rails, along with several jugs of Kentucky bourbon.
After a Christmas feast, guests at a typical gathering would engage in a variety of activities. Men would sometimes sit around a fire to talk and smoke. Women formed their own circles, and children would play. The Southern tradition of setting off fireworks was adopted by some, or if a family was poor, several blasts of a gun were substituted. Upon leaving a Christmas gathering, one Kentuckian recalled the kindness of the host, who had provided each of his guests with hot bricks wrapped in a blanket to keep them warm on the journey home.
In some remote areas of the state during the 1800s and early 1900s, Kentuckians of English, Scottish, and Irish descent celebrated something that's now referred to as Old Christmas. It was celebrated on January 6th, and it was more of a religious rather than a secular holiday. Those who participated in Old Christmas would put their emphasis on the Bible, and they would exchange small gifts among themselves. One Kentucky writer who attended an Old Christmas gathering described the atmosphere.
I recall the men, their leathery faces softened by the flickering glow of the kerosene lamps and the open fire, telling old world Christmas tales they'd heard from their ancestors. How at the stroke of 12, a deep hush would fall all over the world, and the cattle would low softly and fall to their knees, just as they had done on that long ago night in Bethlehem. And for a brief moment would have the power of speech.
By the turn of the century, the celebration of Christmas in Kentucky was rapidly becoming the major event as we know it today. Christmas trees slowly began to show up in houses throughout the Commonwealth. Shoes and stockings were put out for gifts. Santa Claus became a fixture in the minds of children. Around this time, businessmen realized that the holiday could be profitable. Newspapers began running Christmas advertisements in an effort to lure holiday shoppers to their doors. The most popular gifts in the early 1900s, according to an Owensboro newspaper, were umbrellas, jewelry, and a fuzzy little creature called a teddy bear. Also in the early 1900s, Christmas cards and letters began to pour through post offices, causing local postal officials to hire extra workers to help offset the influx. In 1902, one Western Kentucky postmaster was forced to hire extra men to help carriers pull mail carts 2 days before and after Christmas.
Alan McClarney, a farmer from Henderson County, got up extra early the day before Christmas to do his chores by lantern light. When he finished, he hitched a team of horses to his carriage and made the long, rough ride into Henderson to buy his children something special for Christmas. After buying several simple gifts, he rode home in the darkness and hid the presents in the corn crib in the barn. Early on Christmas morning, he went out to the barn and returned to the kitchen where his wife was making breakfast. Noticing a change in his mood, his wife asked him what was wrong. Alan proclaimed that the damned old sow had eaten the gifts. He hitched up his carriage and rode back into town.
As the commercialization of Christmas continued to build in heavily populated areas, families in remote regions of Kentucky continued to celebrate Christmas in a modest manner. These families often pooled all their resources to buy simple presents for their children. To these families, Christmas meant more than gifts. It was a time to be together and thankful.
A Kentucky writer tells us of a 7-year-old from Columbia who, when asked by his parents if he got everything that he wanted for Christmas, responded, "Well, I didn't get everything I wanted, but I like what I got more than what I wanted." And so we come to the place today where the Christmas spirit continues to dwell throughout the year, home in Kentucky. For here, like hundreds of years ago in a land far away, miracles still happen. For new generations will carry the Christmas tradition to Kentucky and beyond. This is Barbara Deeb, and remember, we're just around the corner on Main Street.